Shams al-Din Muhammad bin Ali bin Maliki Dad or Shams al-Din Tabrezi, meaning, the son of faith from Tabriz, was a Persian Sufi saint who is best known for his intense spiritual relationship with Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. He is credited for wholly transforming Maulana Rumi's life and thought after arriving in Konya in 642/1244. Hazrat Shams left a single work in prose known as Maqalat, discourses, which reveal him to be highly proficient in philosophy, theology and spirituality. He was an engaging speaker whose words were both simple and profoundly moving. Early life and family. Hazrat Shams was born at some point in the 1180s in Tabriz, present-day Iran. Tabriz was popular among Sufis, and many great Sufi saints such as Hazrat Ahmad Ghazali, Hazrat Najmuddin Kubra and Abu Najib al-Shirawardi had spent some time there. During his early years, it is said that a group of 70 saints were living in Tabriz. From a young age, he was gifted with spiritual abilities which his parents could not comprehend. His father was said to be a good man of generous nature, although he was not on the spiritual path, and thus Hazrat Shams was unable to reveal his mystic visions to him. This resulted Hazrat Shams feeling estranged from his father and others because he could not explain his spiritual sensibilities to those around him. He says in his Maqalat, "My father didn't understand me at all. I was a stranger in my own town. My father was a stranger to me and my heart recoiled from him. I thought he might fall upon me. He'd speak kindly to me, but I thought he'd beat me and expel me from the house." Maqalat 740. When his father would tell him that he didn't understand his ways, Hazrat Shams would answer by telling him that they were not cut of the same cloth. For about 30 or 40 days just before he reached adolescence, his progress on the spiritual path made him averse to food, and he would hide food in his sleeve whenever it was offered to him. Education. Hazrat Shams was a Shafi'i and he studied fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, extensively. One of the 5 major Shafi'i legal texts he specifically mentions he studied was Al-Tanbi fil Fiqh al-Shafi'i, written by Hazrat Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, died in 1083, one of the leading Shafi'i jurisprudents of the 11th century and one of the first teachers of the famous Baghdad Nizamiya College. He always supported the scholarly study of religion, and he did not like the pretense of those who prided themselves solely on the spiritual path. "At first I wouldn't mix with jurists, only with the dervishes. I'd say that the jurists are ignorant of dervishhood. Now that I have realized what dervishhood is and where they are, I find myself more eager for the company of jurists than dervishes, because the jurists have struggled to attain something. These others boast that we are dervishes. But where is the true dervish?" Maqalat 249. He was thus very educated, although he hid this fact from religious scholars to an extent that his peers were confused about whether he considered himself to be a faqih, scholar of the law, or a faqir, Sufi ascetic. He says, "Someone asked my friend about me, is he a faqih or a faqir?" "Both faqih and faqir," he replied. He asked, "Then why do all speak of his fiqh?" He answered, "For his poverty is of such a nature that it cannot be spoken about with that group. He speaks beyond the boundaries of knowledge and speaks of mysteries in a knowledgeable way in the cloak of knowledge." Maqalat 326. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi described Hazrat Shams as being unrivaled in his knowledge of alchemy, astronomy, astrology, logic, theology and philosophy, although he kept this fact hidden in the company of religious people. Hazrat Sultan Walid, Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi's son, describes him as a man of learning and wisdom and eloquence in composition, spiritual teacher and order. During his childhood, Hazrat Shams had a passionate spiritual master, Hazrat Sheikh Abu Bakr Salabaf. Salabaf literally means wicker worker, of Tabriz, also known as Pir-e Salabaf, who would often twirl him around in meditative dance, Sama. Hazrat Sheikh Salabaf had his own Sufi lodge in the Sharandab district of Tabriz, to the west of the shrine of Imam Hafad, died in 1175. Unlike the customs of most Sufi tariqas, Hazrat Salabaf did not bestow the honorary cloak, kurka, on his disciples to symbolize initiation into a Sufi order. Instead, Hazrat Shams was bestowed the cloak not through a teacher but by the Holy Prophet himself. Everyone talks of his own sheikh. In a dream the Prophet, peace upon him, gave me a ceremonial cloak, kurka, not the kind that will wear out and rip after a few days and fall in the bathhouse and be washed of dirt, but a cloak of converse, sobat, not a converse that can be comprehended, but a converse that is not of yesterday, today or tomorrow. Maqalat 326. He could therefore be described as an Uwaisi Sufi, named after the great saint Hazrat Uwais al-Qarni, who despite never meeting the Holy Prophet Muhammad physically was fully aware of his spiritual presence at all times during his life. After training with Hazrat Salabaf for some time, he quickly excelled and wanted to gain greater perfection and so went on a journey to seek out saints and holy men. Abdul Wahid Tab. Journey. After leaving Tabriz, Hazrat Shams traveled through various places including Baghdad, Damascus, Aleppo, Kayseri, Aksaray, Shivas, Erzurum and Erzincan. He traveled hidden from the people, constantly striving to guard his miracles and mysteries. Rather than boarding in Sufi lodges, which would provide free hospitality, Hazrat Shams acted and dressed like merchants and would thus stay in inns, which he would have to pay for. In every inn that he stayed, he would put a huge lock on his door, although within the room itself there was nothing but a straw mat. Even though he ate very little and often went without food for several days, he still needed a source of income to cover his expenses during his travels. Therefore, he would teach children how to read the Quran and even developed a method for teaching the whole Quran in a mere 3 months. When he did not stay very long in one place, he would earn money by weaving trouser ties. Whilst in Erzincan, he tried to construction work, like he had done in his youth, but due to his simple eating habits and perceived frailty, nobody would hire him. Hazrat Shams, like many Sufis, thus seemed very opposed to the practice of begging. Hazrat Shams' quest. Hazrat Shams spent much of his life traveling from place to place and listening to lectures of famous teachers, most of whom he found disappointing in one respect or another. Regarding the Sufis he had met during his journey, he says, "I've seen many special dervishes and spent time in their company. Through what they say and through their behavior, the true ones are distinguishable from the impostors. My meek heart will not incline to them unless they are extremely praiseworthy and special, nor will this bird peck at every seed." He longed to find that saintly and spiritual companion that he was looking for during his journey. He writes, "I implored God to allow me to mix with and be a companion of his friends." Aliya quote. "I had a dream and was told, 'We will make you a companion of a saint.' I asked, 'Where is this saint?' The next night I was told in a dream, 'He is in Anatolia, Rum.' After a while, I had another dream and was told, 'It's not yet time. All things come in the fullness of time.'" Maqalat 759-60. Elsewhere, he states, "I can talk to myself. I can talk with anyone in whom I see myself." Maqalat 99. "I wanted someone of my own type to make into my Qibla, the direction one faces in prayer, and turn to, for I had grown tired of myself." Do you understand what I mean by having grown tired of myself? Then, having turned into a Qibla, he would understand and comprehend what I am saying. Maqalat 219-20. Meeting with Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. On November 29, 1244, Hazrat Shams arrived in Konya. According to Mevlevi tradition, he was over 60 years old when he arrived in the town. Upon arriving, he stayed at an inn and it was outside the inn, at a little shop or pavilion, where he met Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi. This area was often a meeting point for the notables of the city at the time. Accounts differ as to exactly what happened at this first meeting between the two, but it was a life-changing experience for Maulana Rumi. The most frequently repeated account of what happened is related by Ahmed Aflaki in Manaqib al-Arifin. One day, as he, Shams, was seated at the gate of an inn, Rumi came by, riding on a mule, in the midst of a crowd of students and disciples on foot. Shams arose, advanced and took hold of the mule's bridle, addressing Rumi in these words, "Exchanger of the current coins of deep meaning, who knows the names of God?" Tell me, was Muhammad the greater servant of God, or Bayezid Bistami? Rumi answered him, Muhammad was incomparably the greatest of all prophets and saints. Then, rejoined Shams, how is it that Muhammad said, we have not known thee, O God, as thou ought to be known, whereas Bayezid said, glory unto me. How great is my glory? On hearing this question, Rumi fainted. On regaining his senses, he took the questioner to his home. An exchange ensued between the two men, with Maulana Rumi finally saying that Hazrat Bayezid's spiritual thirst was quenched after one drink. He spoke of being full and so he stopped seeking. However, the Prophet's thirst was never quenched and he went on seeking, aspiring to be drawn closer to the divine. It was for this reason that he said, we have not known thee as thou ought to be known. Hearing this, it was Hazrat Shams that fainted. This account is supported by Hazrat Shams in his own writings, who says, the first thing I spoke about with him was this: how is it that Bayezid did not need to follow the example of the Prophet, and did not say, glory be to thee, or we worship thee? And Rumi completely understood the full implications of the problem and where it came from and where it was leading to. It made him ecstatic on account of his purity of spirit, for his spirit was pure and cleansed and it shone within him. I realized the sweetness of this question from his ecstasy, though I had been previously unaware of its sweetness. Makalat 685. This account is the most reliable of the meeting between the two, although other perhaps less accurate accounts are given. Hazrat Muhyiddin Abdul Qadir ibn Abi al-Wafa al-Qurayshi, d.1373, gives one account of the meeting. Rumi was sitting in his library with some books and his pupils gathered around him. Shams came along, greeted them, sat down and gesturing toward the books, asked, what are these? Rumi replied, you wouldn't know. Before Rumi finished speaking, the books and the library caught on fire. What's this? Cried Rumi. Shams retorted, you wouldn't know either, and got up and left. Rumi got up, leaving his position and family behind, and followed after him, captivated and extemporizing poems, from city to city, but never caught up with him again. Others such as the great Sufi Hazrat Abdur Rahman Jami tell a slightly different version of this encounter, where water is substituted for fire. Rumi was sitting near a garden pool with a few books when Shams arrived and asked, what's this? Rumi replied, these are called debates, but you needn't bother with them. Shams touched them and threw them in the water. Rumi got upset at the ruin of these rare and precious books. Shams reached in the water and retrieved them one by one. Rumi saw that there was no trace of water damage on them. What secret is this? He asked. Shams replied, this is spiritual inclination and entrancement. What would you know of it? First meeting. In his discourses, Hazrat Shams alludes to the fact that he had briefly encountered Maulana Rumi 16 years prior to their meeting in Konya, perhaps during a lecture or debate. I don't mix much with anyone, even with one so great, Sadr, that though you sift the whole world you won't find another like him. 16 years passed during which I said only, hello, and he left. Makalat 290. The outward aspects vary, but the reality is one. I remember about Maulana from 16 years ago, he would say that creatures are just like clusters of grapes. The individual numbers are the outward aspect. When you squeeze them in a bowl, are there individual grapes? Makalat 690. He indicates that although he perceived a special quality in Maulana Rumi at their first encounter, he felt he had not yet reached a level of spiritual maturity which would allow him to receive Hazrat Shams favorably. After waiting for 16 years, he felt it was his mission to release Maulana Rumi in order to unlock his spiritual greatness. He tells Maulana, I was strongly inclined to you from the beginning, but I saw in the opening of your speech that at that time you were not ready for this secret. Even if I had told you, it would not have been destined at that time, and we would never have attained this present moment together, for at that time you didn't have this spiritual state. Makalat 618 to 619. They have sent me because that precious servant is caught in the company of crude people, it's a pity that they should squander him. Makalat 622. Ahmed Aflaki in Manaqib al-Arifin mentions that the brief encounter between the two took place in the square of Damascus, whilst Maulana Rumi was a student there. Hazrat Shams and Maulana Rumi were inseparable, and it is said that the two spent days, even months, together in a state of mystical communion. One biographer describes Maulana's spiritual transformation at the hands of Hazrat Shams. The encounter with Shams triggered the completion of a paradigm shift in Rumi's approach to piety and spirituality. He discovered that beyond the safe, dry, and socially approved forms of obedience, prayer, sermonizing, discovering and applying the principles of law, and renunciation, fasting, controlling the passions and the ego, there is a meta-spirituality of love, which consists in joyously and creatively celebrating our relationship with God. Sama. It was under the direction of Hazrat Shams that Maulana Rumi participated in Sama, the whirling meditation, for the first time. Hazrat Shams explains that for most people, according to Sharia, Sama is forbidden as it serves to increase the passion and lust for those individuals. However, for those seeking divine love, it is permissible since it increases their focus on God. By following his example, Maulana thus made Sama his own custom and practice. Hazrat Sultan Walid, Maulana's son, describes this in his writings. In his Intihanama, Sama became his creed, both true and straight. From Sama 100 flowers filled his heart. Hazrat Sultan Walid looked back on his father's transformation through this poem. Through love, a fatwa-writing sheikh turned poet. Though ascetic, he grew intoxicate. But not from a wine which is made of grapes. A spirit of light drinks only wine of light. Ibtidanama 53. Hazrat Shams therefore freed Maulana from conforming to a traditional role as an Islamic scholar. Hazrat Shams leaves for Syria. The sudden and total disappearance of Maulana aroused resentment among his disciples and students, some of them becoming highly critical of Hazrat Shams, even threatening him. They believed Hazrat Shams had ruined their spiritual circle and prevented them from listening to Maulana's sermons. In March of 1246 he left Konya and went to Syria without warning. After he left, Maulana was grief-stricken, secluding himself even more rather than engaging with his disciples and students. He was without a doubt furious with them. Realizing the error of their ways, they repeatedly repented before Maulana. Some months later, news arrived that Hazrat Shams had been seen in Damascus and a letter was sent to him with apologizing for the behavior of these disciples. Hazrat Sultan Walid and a search party were sent to Damascus to invite him back, and in April 1247, he made his return. During the return journey, he invited Hazrat Sultan Walid to ride on horseback, although he declined, choosing instead to walk alongside him, explaining that as a servant, he could not ride in the presence of such a king. Hazrat Shams was received back with joyous celebration, with Sama ceremonies being held for several days, and all those that had shown him resentment tearfully asked for his forgiveness. He reserved special praise for Hazrat Sultan Walid for his selflessness, which greatly pleased Maulana. As he originally had no intention to return to Konya, he most likely would not have returned if Hazrat Sultan Walid had not himself gone to Damascus in search of him. After his return, he and Maulana Rumi returned to their intense discussions. Referring to the disciples, Hazrat Shams narrates that their newfound love for him was motivated only by desperation. They felt jealous because they supposed, if he were not here, Maulana would be happy with us. Now that I am back, he belongs to all. They gave it a try and things got worse, and they got no consolation from Maulana. They lost even what they had, so that even the enmity, Hava, against Shams, that had swirled in their heads disappeared. And now they are happy and they show me honor and pray for me. Makalat 72. Referring to his absence, he explains that he left for the sake of Maulana Rumi's development. I'd go away 50 times for your betterment. My going away is all for the sake of your development. Otherwise it makes no difference to me whether I'm in Anatolia or Syria, at the Kaaba or in Istanbul, except, of course, that separation matures and refines you. Makalat 164. After a while, by the end of 1247, he was married to Kimia, a young woman who'd grown up in Maulana Rumi's household. Sadly, Kimia did not live long after the marriage and passed away upon falling ill after a stroll in the garden. Hazrat Shams mysteriously disappears. In late 1247 or early 1248, returning to their jealous ways, enmity from some disciples compelled him to depart again. In a conversation with Hazrat Sultan Walid, Hazrat Shams warned him that this time he would disappear into thin air. "This time I'll disappear in such a way that none will know to where I've gone or am. All will fail in their efforts to find me. Never will they detect the slightest clue. Many years will pass, me vanished in thin air. As I draw out the time, someone will claim, surely he was slain at some foe's hand." This he repeated several times for emphasis, Ebtidanama 52. Soon after, he disappeared permanently. Maulana Rumi was for a period of time deeply saddened, and he cut off his association with all those disciples that had showed hostility towards Hazrat Shams. Later, he took a group of his closest disciples to Damascus in search of Hazrat Shams, but unsuccessful in their quest, they eventually returned. A few years later, he undertook a second journey which again proved unfruitful. Although nobody knows for certain what came of Hazrat Shams, Ahmed Aflaki in Manaqib al-Arifin relates that he was murdered by disciples of Maulana Rumi. However, even according to this account, there were no witnesses to his apparent death. Furthermore, neither his son Hazrat Sultan Walid, nor his disciple Hazrat Sapazlar mentioned a murder in their works that are earlier than Aflaki's work. In addition, Maulana Rumi traveled to Syria twice to look for him, so he certainly could not have believed he was murdered. Resting place. Due to the fact he disappeared in mysterious circumstances, it is not known for certain where his resting place lies. According to Iranian scholar Muhammad Ali Muvahed, he probably died in the city of Kohi, modern-day Iran, on his way to Tabriz shortly after leaving Konya. There is indeed a site in Kohi on the road from Konya to Tabriz, associated with the name of Shams-e Tabrezi that dates back to at least 1400. Quota. Joy is like pure clear water, wherever it flows, wondrous blossoms grow. Sorrow is like a black flood, wherever it flows it wilts the blossoms. Makalat 195. A good man complains of no one, he does not look to faults. Makalat 91. My character is such that I pray for Jews. I say, God guide them. I pray for those who curse me, O God, occupy him with a better and more pleasing pursuit than cursing. Makalat 121. What's a sheikh? Being. What's a disciple? Non-existence. Until a disciple ceases to exist, he is not a disciple. Makalat 739. I have no business with the common folk of the world, I have not come for their sake. Those people who are guides for the world unto God, I put my finger on their pulse. Makalat 82. Allah bless him. Thanks dear audience for watching this video. Please like and subscribe us for more videos.